The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
CJ, the Stanley Cup playoff field is set. All 16 teams clinching playoff spots. There's some questions about who could be seated where, who could get home ice advantage, who's in what wildcard spot in the East. But we at least know the 16 teams who will participate in this spring and summer's Stanley Cup playoffs. Feel the excitement. Feel the vibe. Seriously.
Who's the biggest surprise for you?
The biggest surprise?
Like if you think back to like October Julian or September Julian and you were looking, you know, we probably did our predictions and all that. Like which team that's going to play playoff games did you least expect to be there? Because I think there's a few good choices.
Least expect to be there. Philadelphia would count. Oh, well, Pittsburgh, actually. Pittsburgh's actually the number one answer because Pittsburgh, we all had them in the lottery and now they're set. They're going to have home ice to start off the playoffs. And they made sure to take snipes at everybody on their social media account over the weekend by saying they flipped the script and went through all of those different naysayers and their opinions on the Pittsburgh Penguins. They are the number one answer to that question.
I like that, but I'll give honorable mentions in no particular order to Anaheim, to Buffalo, to Utah, and to Philadelphia. I mean, like this truly was a year where the league got put in a bottle and shaken around, and all the balls came out in a different order than I think most people were expecting. I mean, I'm not going to even subject myself to this exercise, but if we went back and listened to our prediction show at the start of the year, I bet there's so many bad takes on there, and we wouldn't be alone. I'd say that for any pod that did the same exercise, but this really was the most that I can remember in recent memory, the most kind of crazy season in terms of just a lot of teams that we expected to be better, not being as good. And then obviously the converse of that is that, man, you're getting Crosby, Malcolm back in the playoffs, Philly back after a long time, Buffalo ending the longest playoff drought, Anaheim after a long time, and even the Utah Mammoth making their debut. It's going to be cool to see
quietly
the playoffs arrive in Salt Lake City. I think that'll be pretty neat.
Quietly, amidst all of that, Utah making the playoffs, as you mentioned, for the first time. It's kind of funny to see that storyline get a little bit lost. I'm excited to see what playoff hockey will look like in that arena. And what I think at this point now, I know it's not.
Don't even make sense of it. It's why, like, the Pacific could go in a lot of different ways, and that includes wild card 1 and 2. Anyway, it could be any number of different possibilities right now.
Is there a team you're looking at in the field right now who could surprise you? And is there a team in the field right now who you think people might be sleeping on a little bit? It could come from either conference. You could have answers for both conferences.
You know, it's my thought that the East is a little more wide open than the West. Mm-hmm. The West probably depends on who comes out of the Central, obviously, because, there's when you have Colorado, Minnesota, Dallas in that division, a team that could surprise. I mean, your Ottawa Senators could surprise. To me, like I could see them going on a run. Carolina and Tampa Bay in the East are obviously the alphas. The Hurricanes have been to the conference final a number of times. Tampa's obviously not that far removed from going to 3 straight Stanley Cup finals, but nothing's a sure thing there. I was polling someone pretty prominent in the league this week, actually, just, what do you think of the teams? And he said, he listed a couple teams and then he goes, Carolina at home. He's like, when you play Carolina at home, it feels like there's 10 men on the ice. So he was sort of saying if they could only play home games, he thinks that they would be a real cup contender. I think the question with Tampa, obviously, they've had some injuries. Victor Hedman's been away from the team for a while here on a personal leave. Just wonder what kind of form they're going to be able to find. An older team, but on balance, they're the team I've heard from some coaches and people around the league that I trust that they feel like they've been the best team in the East this year. But that doesn't guarantee they're going to come out of the East. So I think probably I'll go with Ottawa. I think of the teams that, are going to play a lot of road games in this playoffs that didn't finish at the top of the conference. I think Ottawa has the best chance to go on a longer-ish run right now. That's my feel.
If goaltending holds up and they get few injuries from this point on, I could see the Ottawa Senators going to the Eastern Conference Final. I think there's a path where they win 2 rounds this year.
Right, but we don't even know who they're playing yet. So, like, I don't want to.
Right,
I don't want to go too far down that road.
I'm okay with that. I mean, I think it's maybe a little bit more likely if they go through the Metropolitan path where they play against Carolina, which is a very similar team they could go up against in terms of play style, and then they get the winner of Pittsburgh, Philadelphia. If it's the Atlantic, maybe a little bit more troublesome with that. But I share your opinion. I think they can go on a run with the way that they've been playing. Maybe there's some home coverage bias out of that one, but I do share your optimism with the Ottawa Senators. I
think the West, it's probably going to be. I mean, this isn't like a hot take. It's going to be one of Colorado, Dallas, or Minnesota on one half of the conference final, right? Whoever comes.
Shame that one of those teams are going to be done after round one,
right? Well, but like it's going to be one of those teams I would suspect on the one half of the Western Conference final, and then to me, it's still Edmonton or Vegas. Like I say that with respect to LA and Utah and Anaheim, who also are in the playoffs, but I just think one of Edmonton or Vegas is in the other half of that conference final. So, I don't see neither of those outcomes as a surprise, right? I mean, we've already seen, a few years ago, the Avalanche and Oilers played a Western Conference final against each other. Edmonton's been to the last 2 cups. Vegas is always around it. So I don't see the chaos path developing in the West as, whereas the East, like literally any of the first round series, I think anyone could beat anyone. And I know we don't have the matchups yet. But I do think that there's way more possibility for upsets in my view in the Eastern side of the bracket. And then that brings more of a chaotic feel to like what could happen and how it plays out.
Technically 2 of the matchups in the East are locked in between Tampa, Montreal, and Philadelphia and Pittsburgh. That being said, home ice advantage still to be decided between those Tampa, Montreal, but Pittsburgh for sure has locked up home ice advantage.
Right. But I could see basically all the combinations. I'm willing to entertain an upset in all 4 Eastern matchups. In the West, once they're locked in, I suspect I won't say the same. I think there'll be 1 or 2 series where I'm like, I don't really see a path for Team X to beat Team Y.
I'm starting to wonder if the Oilers are getting slept on a bit too, just because of the fact that they're in the pillow fight of a division that
not by me, man. Not by me.
You're heavy on the Oilers.
I'm heavy on the Oilers. Like I don't know. We've just seen this act before. I do think that their playoff experience counts for something. I think the fact that Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl year after year after year have been beasts come playoff time. And I know it's not a slam dunk. Draisaitl is dressing for game 1 of that series, which I hear will be Monday next week. Will be most likely where Edmonton starts the playoffs. So he's got, a little less than a week from now till then. But, he's going to be in the early stages of round 1. All that's at stake for that team. Connor Ingram kind of quietly has been giving them some good goaltending. I think he's given them a little confidence at that position. There's unknowns and injuries and all sorts of things pop up in the playoffs. There's no guarantees out there. But I don't care about the Oilers' regular season record or how their regular season went. I think it gets back to spring, and it's fair to expect them to, they do have the Pacific Division path for one, but secondly, I think they're a different team when the stakes are higher, and they have 2 of the absolute best players in the world, if not the best players in the world. And that hasn't yet carried them to a cup, but also keep in mind for them, like they went up against a Florida team in the last 2 finals that, that was a beast. And frankly, last year's final, they were farther from winning than obviously 2024 final. Like they felt like they lost ground to the Panthers over that year. Well, the Panthers aren't around no more. Panthers are about to play their last game of the season. They're going to get a long off season. I suspect they'll be contenders again next year. But there is, I think that will bring a little bit of a boost to Edmonton. I'm not saying they're thinking about a potential cup final on April 15th, but I just think knowing that it's going to be a little different potential outcome out there, to me, Edmonton that's a scary team. Even if they face like a Colorado, which I would expect, they'll be the underdog in that series. I wouldn't assume too much if that's the way this plays out.
I would love a Colorado Edmonton series. One last thing before I talk more about teams outside of the playoffs. I know the matchup isn't locked in yet for them in the East, but no matter how this goes, I'm just happy we're going to see playoff hockey in Buffalo for the first time since 2011. And they're a top seed in the Eastern Conference, which is amazing.
Well, I'm happy to tell you that I'm old enough that I was around and covering games back when the Sabres were really good. And that building is amazing. Like, I've been in there a lot over the years for wild atmospheres and everything. And despite what we saw 15, 16 years ago, when you're just going to have to take my word for it that building rocked, Julian, I think it's going to be on another level because, absence makes the heart grow fonder, right? It's been so long, so much time has passed for Sabres fans. I mean, I can identify this a little bit, even, seeing the Blue Jays get back to big games after long time. The way that feels, like you almost can't let yourself believe it's going to happen again. So I'm with you. I think the Sabres crowd is going to be one of the stories of the first round. I don't know about the Sabres team yet. And it's not to say I'm down on them, but I'm not sure what we're going to get from them under a different level of hockey. I mean, that's the other funny part about this is, we've all watched games for the last, 6-7 months. And then by Saturday afternoon, when the puck drops in the first game of the Stanley Cup playoffs, like the hockey changes. The first shift is like anything you don't see elsewhere in the year. And so I'm curious to see how they meet that moment. But I mean, that's why we do this. So see what happens. And, for Buffalo, you're right. Long time coming. And I think it's going to be really, really cool atmosphere there.
Love it. The matchups coming up for in the next couple of days, I should say. Looking forward to it. Also, we'll say a quick shout out to Anze Kopitar in his final year in the NHL. His Kings getting into the playoffs. We'll see how long it lasts for them. But that is also a fun storyline to follow.
They only played, 38 overtime games or something? Like half their games went to overtime. Those guys didn't get paid for all that overtime. That's a lot of extra work.
Know. Hey, man, but 5 consecutive wins to get them into the playoffs, 7 wins in their last 10. At least the LA Kings are coming in hot.
And some fans in the Toronto region are happy about that because the Scott Lawton draft pick upgrades to a second rounder from a third rounder because the Kings qualified for the playoffs.
At least they're getting some kind of top pick this year. Well, we'll see how the draft lottery shakes out.
If you've been around the Leafs this year, they'll take a win wherever they can find one.
Hold your fire on the Toronto Maple Leafs, and because I know I'm going to ask you if there's been any updates on a GM search. I do want to spend a moment on the teams who are not making the NHL playoffs. There's a handful to go through, but one team that stands out to me, the Detroit Red Wings. There was a point in this year they were top in the Eastern Conference, and now they have the longest playoff drought in the NHL at 10 years. What do you make of their stunning collapse, which sees Detroit out of the playoffs again?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, it's funny. They had the longest active streak ever in NHL history for making the playoffs, and then they transition now to 10 years without the playoffs directly out of that. I mean, it highlights, I think, some of the perils of a rebuild. It highlights, only having 16 of 32 teams qualified for the playoffs. It means a lot of teams miss each year. And frankly, it's been a trend for them to have these down stretches the last, 4, 5, 6 weeks of the regular season, which, it's not just that Detroit's missed the playoffs. Like, they've missed it by small margins the last few years, right? They haven't been really in the draft lottery those years. It's not like they've been at the bottom of the league, but they just haven't been able to find enough victories down the stretch to sneak their way in there. And there's a lot of questions now being asked about, where the front office is going to go. It's my understanding there's certainly no expectation at this time that Steve Yzerman's going anywhere, who's been the general manager during this time. The Yzer plan, I guess it's probably been dubbed somewhere.
That is what they call it.
And it hasn't yielded the kind of results they like. I mean, easy for me to say because I don't have skin in the game or emotion in the game. And I can imagine Red Wings fans are just down in the dumps about this, but they still do have a lot of good young prospects. Moritz Seider had a great year for them. I still believe it's coming for that team. I don't think I don't view it as like them being lost at sea and they're never going to get it right. But that being said, it's hard when you get to April and you're going to see the playoffs played in all those other cities and you're like, man, we're not going to get this for at least another year. And there's still no guarantees of that. So, it's a big off season in Detroit. I think they've been pretty patient and not, dealing away from all the prospects and young players they've built up. I wonder if that changes, if there's a little more of a willingness to take a swing. But there's no way around it, man. It plain stinks for that organization, for the teams, for guys like Dylan Larkin who've been there the whole time, and it's not really on his shoulders. I'm sure he's feeling it. He's the captain of the team, but he had another strong year, and they were, in the final analysis, they were just a couple points short. Any team can go back over the course of a long season and think of a night where they gave a game away, or, it's not hard to find like, hey, we could have been 3 points better with this, and this happening. And I say that for any team. And so, yeah, I think it's a massive offseason in Detroit. Be curious to see if there's any front office fallout, but as of this moment, what I can tell you is I'm hearing no expected changes in terms of how that front office looks at this time.
Too many pissed away points for that team. The two games that come to mind, them losing against the Sens team that was essentially down to like 4 everyday defensemen and had to call up 2 rookies at the back end. And then that Minnesota game on the weekend where they were trading goals. I think they had the lead, or they blew it, or just that game in particular, that was such a crazy outcome to watch over the weekend, which ended up with them losing off a Kirill Kaprizov game winner. Too many opportunities for the Detroit Red Wings to pick up points and keep themselves in the playoff picture, and ultimately it's washed away. I'm sure fans could hit us in the mentions and point some other games.
I'd love to see our colleague at The Athletic, Max Boltman, do like the 5 biggest losses of the season, like games where that you're sort of highlighting here. Because I bet, again, you can do this with any team. I didn't watch every Red Wings game this year, obviously. Mm-hmm. But I bet that there's all kinds of examples where the margins are so small. I mean, this is one reason why I like the idea of expanded playoffs in the NHL, because it almost feels like if Columbus had got in, if Detroit had got in this year, like I don't think those would be bad teams. I don't think that there's that much difference between them and a Philadelphia or these other teams that, I guess you have to draw the line somewhere, would be the other side of this argument. But to me, I just think there's room at least for some kind of wild card. And to me, a Detroit and a Columbus in a wild card type of scenario for at the end of this season in the East, I think that would have been fair. That would have been just. If they won a wild card game or a 2 out of 3 and they went in the first round, I don't think you could be that mad. You wouldn't be like, wow, that's not fair. They were so far behind Team X, because I just think the reality is they weren't that far behind a number of teams that did make it.
Also, to people who push back on expanded playoffs and play-in games, you say that, but if you get a real good matchup in a play-in game, all of a sudden you're wrapped up and watching the TV just like everybody else. Like, I'm all for some form of expanded playoffs, even if it's just like a win and you're in scenario for a team.
We should acknowledge, though, I don't think I'm going to end up writing the story, but I've done some reporting for a story I was going to do on the playoff format. And a lot of people aren't for the expanded playoffs. Like, even people who just want to see it go back to 1-8 or want to see some kind of change. Like, it's not universal. Not everyone around the league wants to see it grow. I mean, really, my basis for it is I think that, again, the margins are so small. I think it's still competitively fair. And I just think more games, more revenue, more money. Imagine we were starting this weekend with a couple game 7s, it's not to say the game 1s we're going to watch, but if you had a couple wild card games this weekend instead and then started the playoffs next week, I think that we'd be pretty excited about that. Right. And I bet even if there's some sort of, we'll call them random teams or not big national teams in those games, I still think they would draw a pretty good audience just because of the curiosity factor about what's going to happen.
Any thoughts on some of the other teams missing the playoffs? Washington, obviously coming to mind. Big weekend for them. The Ovechkin Crosby renaissance. They play each other for the 100th time in the regular season on the Sunday. Love the fact that Ovi and Crosby have their moment in the face-off circle. They have the photos at center ice before the game. But the Pens get waved off post-game by Ovechkin. We would have expected them to go line up and shake hands with Ovechkin, but Ovechkin's like, nah, we don't need to do this. Well, what did you think of the weekend?
Remember that? So that was on Sunday. And At that point in time, there was still the very real possibility Washington made the playoffs. And had Washington made the playoffs, they would have had to leapfrog Philly and they would have been playing Pittsburgh. So think how weird it would be if you're Ovechkin. You're still of the mindset, we're trying to make the playoffs here. They took care of their own business. They won the games here in the last week. They had to win to to put themselves in position to stay in that race. It would be so strange if you got up and shook hands at center ice and then you're right back there playing that team in a week in the playoffs. So I don't know what's in Ovechkin's mind, but I actually didn't interpret that as a sign he's not leaving. I just took it as that it's not the right time for him to have that kind of send off. I'm curious to see, what it looks like on Tuesday night, where now all of a sudden Washington's eliminated officially Monday night. They finished the season with a game that doesn't have any consequence in the standings for either team against the Columbus Blue Jackets in Columbus. Let's see how that looks and feels, because now it's final, right? The Capitals and Ovechkin know they won't be playing playoff games. I'm curious to see how that goes down. I mean, I'm still of the view here that I think if I had to, and it's a guess, this is not reporting. I still think this guy is at the end of his career. Just everything that I've seen, him trading the jerseys, picking up warm-up pucks in some of these games the last week. He took a morning skate in Toronto, the game I was at last Wednesday, was looking around like he does. This guy he didn't even have to take the morning skate. He doesn't usually do that. There were some shots of him. They played their last game at Madison Square Garden, seeming to take it all in. I do think it's entirely possible he just hasn't made up his mind and he's trying to savor it just in case. But, I get the feeling Ovechkin doesn't want to do a big year-long tour like Kopitar did. He doesn't want to be getting gifts everywhere and having teams shake his hand in that way. I mean, we even saw the Maple Leafs played in LA, about a week and a half ago. Tavares tried to do a little handshake thing with Kopitar and he's like, hey, take it in the back. Like, we'll shake hands behind the scenes. I feel like the signs are kind of right there for us with Ovechkin that this is the end, but he just doesn't want to make a big show of it. And let's face it, this guy got celebrated for a long, basically March of 2025 was a big, long Alex Ovechkin celebration. He kept scoring goals. He ultimately chased down that record and became the NHL's all-time goal scoring leader. Tuesday night could be it. This might be the last chance to watch him in Capitals jersey. It's pretty crazy. I don't know if you saw Caps PR actually put out a press release sort of detailing their Sunday home game, like all the ways Ovechkin, this possibility changed things. They sold like 2.5 times more merchandise than they normally do at that game. 75% of the jerseys sold that day were Ovechkin jerseys.
Of course.
I think it was their third highest average ticket price in like a long period of time. I don't have the full list, but basically put it this way. Capitals fans are picking up what we're putting down here, that this could be the end of the run for, one of the NHL's all-time greats. And, kind of sorry from a storyline standpoint. Again, we're not cheering for teams here, but we could have got one last Capitals Penguins series. That would have been pretty cool. But, if this is the end, I don't think we have anything to feel bad about. I mean, Ovechkin played a ton of games, scored a ton of goals. Truly one of the few players over his era that put butts in the seats that was primetime box office viewing. And I don't know. Got a sneaking suspicion this is the end.
Not to mention, if this is it for him, it brings an end, at least in the NHL, to one of the most incredible rivalries, player v player, we've ever seen in professional sports. Like, just going
it's our
back
bird
to
magic.
It's literally our bird magic. Like, I think of when I was a young fan looking at both of those two players going toe to toe in the playoffs, the Calder Trophy race, at so many different points. I wonder when's the next time we're going to have something like that in the National Hockey League.
It could be 30 or 40 years because you can't line it up the way it lined up, right? Like they entered the league at the same time because of a lockout. Like they were back-to-back first overall picks, but then the season after Ovechkin was drafted was wiped out by a lockout. They entered the league at the same time in the same division. They both have incredible amounts of hype around them. They both deliver on it and then some. And they lead their teams to be two of the best teams in the NHL over, a good chunk of a 20-year period. Obviously, there were some down seasons for both franchises in there, but they were top teams for a huge portion of that time. They play each other 4 times in the playoffs. All 4 years, the winner of the series goes on to win the Cup final. I mean, that just adds kind of the lore and legend. They played a little bit internationally. That got curtailed in the back half of their careers, but there's a pretty notable Canada-Russia game at the 2010 Olympics in Vancouver. I mean, and that was the height of kind of contrasting and trying to build up a rivalry 1v1 style. the fact they also spent their entire careers with one organization. Like, we're just not going to see that a lot in the sport. We don't see it already too often. Having that confluence of factors, I mean, I'm not going to say it's never going to happen again, but it's not something you're going to see too often. And you're right. I think that's kind of part of in a weird way, they elevated each other's careers. I mean, had those players come along and put up those numbers and did everything they did at any time, they'd be NHL greats. But the fact they did it kind of, 1v1 style and especially early in their careers, I think that was a big part of the selling point of the NHL. The NHL played up that rivalry, right? They had them in that outdoor game back in 2011. They did the very first behind the scenes series, the 24/7 series with HBO at the time, around those players and those teams. Pretty special stuff. And I think you see the appreciation now. Like, it's actually cool for me, having been around those guys through so many of those moments. I covered a few of those playoff series. They went head to head. I was at all the cup finals where their teams won. To see that it did go from a rivalry to something that there's obviously immense respect there. And I think that they already appreciate that they kind of added something to each other's careers is pretty neat. I love seeing them exchange jerseys behind the scenes. And the fact that it was their 100th head-to-head meeting in the NHL on Sunday was, just kind of feels storybook, a nice round number. And, you're right. We're not going to see that. I don't think we're going to see that again for a long, long time because a lot had to come together to make that as special as it was.
That's very well said. I'll miss that rivalry. Anyway, as we continue down the list of teams who are going to miss the playoffs, do you have a Leafs update on the general manager search?
Yeah, look, it's still very wide open. And, there's a lot of fixation, I'd say, here in the Toronto market on one job, one structure, this or that. Here's what I can tell you. The Leafs themselves, Keith Pelley, is not committed to what the structure of that front office is going to be. What they're focused on, though, is finding and identifying one head of their hockey operations department, titled TBD, and then having that person dictate how the structure flows from there. And so they may still yet end up with a president, a GM, a series of assistant GMs, or it might just be a GM and something else. Like, I think that the Leafs are open-minded. And, the truth is, with a lot of these searches, often, Julian, I think we know kind of in the back of our minds who it's likely to go to. That's not the case here. This is truly wide open. I've talked to a number of people around the Leafs, around the league, and, there's a ton of names out there, but I don't think that there's truly one favored candidate. There's not one clear winner here. I think certainly there's from the ownership level of the Leafs, they want this to be a robust search. And so you're going to hear names, assistant GMs being in on these talks with Keith Pelley. Like, the Leafs are going to do those interviews, but I'm still sort of straining to think that they're going to actually put a current assistant GM at the head of their hockey operations pyramid. Could happen, of course. But point is the process is still in its earlier nascent stages. I know Keith Pelley was at some MLS, owners type of meetings, soccer meetings this week to start the week. But, his focus is entirely right now basically on this search, and it's kind of unfolding. So, I don't have a lot of tangible updates other than I think people are getting hung up on a lot of the titles here. They're getting hung up on the whole data centric thing. The Leafs are really rebuilding a front office. They're not just hiring. It starts with hiring one person who's going to sit at the top of the hockey operation structure, but they're reimagining how they work, how things go within that front office to make sure they're, correctly making use of all the resources available to them. And, it's mid-April. The earliest I think we're getting news on this is mid-May. Maybe it speeds up. But this is still going to be a blow-by-blow thing. And frankly, for the organization right now, they got one game left on the regular season schedule. They've got locker cleanout on Thursday. I'm told there will be exit meetings with the players, even though they don't have a sitting general manager right now, but they do have, acting GMs, co-GMs in Brandon Pridham and Ryan Hardy, plus Craig Berube is obviously there. So there will be the exit meetings. They get through the media side of things. And then I think, the search probably takes on a little bit more urgency and expediency as we get beyond the end of this season formally.
And what about Craig Berube's future?
It remains up in the air. I don't think, my understanding is we're not likely to hear anything on his front. I think the Leafs are going to, basically fill out the front office before any decisions are made and leave those decisions up to the people they put in charge of the operation moving forward. So I would expect, unless there's a change of plans or something surprising happens, that Craig Berube is going to kind of be in limbo for the next little while. He's coached out this season. I think he's been very professional under difficult circumstances with how he's represented the organization. He's the one out there every day, taking the bullets, fielding questions on this, obviously multiple times a day on game days. It's not been an easy year for anyone around the Leafs. I can tell you, I don't recall sensing this level of just fatigue. And I'm talking from support staff to the people at the top in terms of the front office, the structure that's remaining, to the players. Losing is not easy in any market. I think it's especially hard in a place like Toronto when your team was supposed to be good, right? Keith Pelley did an interview in October with Pierre LeBrun and said, we've got the right people to take us, I hope, to the promised land, something like that. And, they're at best, they're going to hit 80 points. They finished, they were a 108-point team a year ago. This is the largest year-over-year decline in points in a 109-year history of NHL hockey in Toronto. So, it's been you've already seen a general manager fired, and that's not just someone a lot of people like in Brad Treliving. It creates uncertainty for everyone remaining in the department, right? If he's gone, am I going to be gone? What's going to happen? Who's in charge? So this has been a hard time. And this is what happens, obviously, when teams fall short. But I think everyone is really looking forward to getting through this week, just in terms of formally closing the chapter on the season and then getting some clarity and some answers on what everything looks forward to. And so, I don't think we'll get any news on Craig Berube until at least a month, until the new GM or president, whatever it ends up being, gets hired. Obviously, that person will be asked about Craig Berube at that time. A lot of focus in this market too, Julian. Morgan Riley, 950 games in a Leafs uniform, 7th most all time for the franchise. He's still got a number of years left on his contract, but people talking about maybe this is the end of the road for him, which it obviously could be, but it's hard to handicap that when you don't know who's making the call. And so even Morgan's getting questions of that nature, but he doesn't know. I don't know. Austin Matthews is going to get behind the microphone on Thursday. He's going to be asked a lot about his future. This is a guy that wants to stay with the Leafs, but he doesn't know what the future holds. Are they going into a big rebuild here? Does the person or people that are hired to run the organization, what's their view of things? So he's going to have to wait. It's one of these things. This is a big week in terms of everyone just getting through it, taking a deep breath, going into the off season. But the questions that we have mostly aren't going to be answered in the next few days. I think this is going to play out over the next weeks and even, potentially 2 months. I mean, by the time we get to the draft at the end of June, the Leafs organization is going to look different. We're going to have a sense of direction. We might already have some decisions on guys like Berube or even Riley. But in the here and now, it's just it's been a death march, man. It's been really, really straining for a lot of people on the team. I mean, look, they've introduced some younger players here the last week or two. You get a guy like Jacob Quillen scoring his first NHL goal on Monday night. Stuff like that does provide, I think, a little mental boost because, even among the disappointment, I mean, you can recognize it's a long path for anyone who reaches NHL, but, probably a few Leafs players going to the World Championship. But beyond that, I think everyone's looking forward to getting away from hockey here pretty soon.
Very good Leafs corner, CJ. You gave us a lot more than I thought you were going to give us.
Yeah, it was a bit of soapbox. You teed me up and then I just, stepped up and started swinging.
I saw you go right into flow state during that segment. Again, two things.
A lot of bounce around my mind, though. Obviously, I'm around the team a lot, and we're working on a big story that's coming out on Wednesday with the Athletic. So, which was a lot of basically, I'd sum it up as what went wrong this year. How did the Leafs end up here? And there's a lot of different threads to pull on there. So, I guess I've been going deep mentally on the Leafs here of late in recent days.
Yeah, it's very much top of mind. Can't wait to read that deep dive when that's out at The Athletic. You also worked on a agent poll with our friends Michael Russo and James Myrtle. Seen a lot of people online react to it. Who's the best run franchise according to these agents? worst run franchise. Any takeaways from you throughout that process and with some of the results that have come out?
Yeah, it's a super cool exercise for those that get to do it. We ended up getting 23 agents who participated. We could have had double that amount if we had more time. You know, some of the conversations that I had personally, obviously I wasn't in on the ones that James and Mike did. We basically split up, you know, who we spoke to, but some of them ran like 40, 45 minutes. You know, you start asking these questions and you don't always get a, hey, who's the best run franchise from your perspective? You don't always get a, well, it's Florida and that's it. Like usually it ends up prompting discussions. So I would say it was really cool for me to have those discussions, and I appreciate the unnamed people that participated, and you know, helped us get to the end result. Of course, what the fans and I think what the readers take away is who's not doing it right. And Vancouver took some knocks in this poll. Carolina Hurricanes and Tom Dundon took some knocks in this poll. You know, but there's a lot more to it. And I'd urge you, if you're interested in sort of league-wide trends and, you know, what people think. I mean, agents don't tend to be too public facing. You know, some of the bigger agents, I'm sure fans know their names. But, you know, agents are interconnected throughout the league in a way, if you're just a casual fan, you might not realize. Obviously, they talk a lot to their clients who are the players. The players know what's going on in their dressing rooms and you know, so agents are tied in there. The agents obviously deal a lot with the general managers, assistant GMs, the media. Like they agents know a lot of what's going on and they have different views. And they're obviously they're not beholden to one team or one client. They can view the whole picture holistically. And, you know, I think what we found is a number of agents were very comfortable. I mean, we granted them anonymity, but with sharing pretty candid views about how things are going. So, you know, basically if you want a high level takeaway, the teams that are winning are the ones that a lot of agents think are doing it right. Teams that have been losing more than winning, you know, get some knocks in a poll like this. You know, a lot of the agents feel we should have a different view of player safety, that there's ways we should change how discipline works in the league. We asked a little bit about the CBA. We asked about some future contracts on the horizon. You know, Cale Makar and Quinn Hughes, both eligible for extensions this summer. Connor Bedard is going to get his next contract this summer. Macklin Celebrini is eligible to get his second contract this summer. So we sort of solicited some opinions on where the numbers could go there and actually got quite a range of responses in terms of the numbers the agents thought. So, you know, I think it's fun and it was a deep dive and, you know, it took us a few weeks to work through getting all those conversations and collaborating it. But I think the product turned out pretty well.
I would love to chat with the agent who voted for the category, who will be the highest paid player by 2028, 2029. I would love to chat with the agent who voted Brady Tkachuk for that answer. I have so many questions for them.
I mean, look, if a player is willing to use their leverage, like who would have guessed Kirill Kaprizov, and I say this with respect, great player, would be the NHL's top paid player next season. I don't think
I can understand that, but that's not out of the realm of possibility. Like Kirill Kaprizov's like a top 10 player in the league. Not that Brady Tkachuk isn't good, but
right. But if he's willing to use his leverage when it comes time, like here's the thing. Right now we're sitting here, you know, Connor McDavid has 2 years left on his deal. Austin Matthews has 2 years left on his deal. I'm going off the top of my head. Cale Makar has 1 year left on his deal. Quinn Hughes has 1 year left on his deal. Zach Werenski has 2 years left on his deal. So we're going to have a number, and then Celebrini is in this mix. We're going to have a number of pretty high profile players get new contracts in the next 1 to 2 years. I'm willing to bet of the guys that could be UFA that possibly none of them hit UFA. Like I would expect, and obviously some of those players could be traded still and do sign and trades, or they're extending where they are a year out. But we have a wave of top players about to be, you know, free contractually. And I don't think any of them will go to July 1st. But if Brady Tkachuk, and I don't know if he might be included among this. Maybe he doesn't get to July 1st, but he's got 2 years left on his deal, right? The next 2 seasons. Mm-hmm. If he's willing to play it out and go to free agency July 1st, 2028, maybe he does become the highest paid player. I mean, I actually, in full candidate, I didn't talk to the agent who gave that answer, so I don't even know who gave it. And I don't know the justification because obviously we keep it private, those conversations, even amongst ourselves. But it's not impossible. I don't think the person was trolling. I think that's a real prediction.
Yeah. By the way, my reaction wasn't to be like, wow, like Brady Tkachuk is going to get paid that much. Not to say he doesn't deserve that money. It's just I do have questions about who we think might give him that money. That's all I have to say about that. And that's as much as I want to wade into that territory.
Hey, let the man get in the playoffs. I'm sure you're going to be talking to him every day for at least the next 2 weeks, if not longer, depending on the Sens run. So
oh, yeah.
No reason to throw any grenades into that dressing room before we start.
No. I think a lot of people in the last couple of weeks have had a lot of opinions on what he should do and where he should go and whatever. I think the man himself, it's on him to make that decision. Anyway, give me a thought on the fourth golfer in Masters history to go back to back in Rory McIlroy. It was looking a little shaky a little bit at some point, but he had a massive lead at 1.2 in the tournament. It was a fun roller coaster ride to follow from start to finish for Rory McIlroy, who again, this year's Masters champion. The floor is yours. Give me your love. Give me your thoughts on Rory doing the damn thing.
Well, I was pretty excited. I'm sure the loyal listeners, the 100%ers know that I'm in Rory's corner in every tournament he plays in. But seeing him get to 6 majors, that's pretty significant in the world of golf. Like, I think he's without question a top 10 all-time player with still lots of ceiling left to go higher. I would remind anyone, because there's some haters, even in our CJ Show group chat, winning a major tournament is not meant to be easy. And, yes, Rory lost the lead on Saturday. Yes, he was down by a couple strokes on the front 9 of the Sunday round, but he was still felt to me in control. He still had the most par 5s to play. He took care of his business. It was far steadier than last year's Masters win. He won and lost that tournament 5 times on Sunday in 2025. Yeah. So it was pretty cool. And there's a couple of unique things about golf. Like, for anyone who isn't a golf fan out there, first of all, the careers are so much longer than most of the other sports. Like, Rory already feels like he's been around forever, and he's still in his 30s and could, Justin Rose, who finished third, I guess, in this tournament, is 45. Like, Rory easily could have another 7 to 10 year window of being competitive in majors. And, he had a 10-year run during his career where he didn't win a major. And now it's like, I guess it's just kind of cool because you can watch over such a longer period of time. Whereas, Ovechkin we're talking about his career, like, it's a 21-year career. Golfers, 30 years is not out of the question as a competitive player for the top guys. So, it was awesome to see him win. And who knows? Maybe I could see him adding more majors this year. Like, I think winning the Masters in 2025 truly was a weight off for Rory. Cleared some emotional baggage. He just seems like he's in a good spot with his game, great spot with his life. And look out, world. I could see him. Like, I think 10 is in reach for him for career majors. Now, it's not going to happen in a year. I don't think that would involve him winning a Grand Slam, which hasn't happened since like the 30s. But I just think he's going to steadily collect them over the next coming seasons. And it was pretty cool. My first ever Masters with Ryder. My dad actually came up on Sunday, so we had 3 generation of Johnston men and boys watching it. Obviously, I think for me, the Masters is my favorite golf tournament of them all. Probably British Open second, I'd say. I mean, all the majors are unique, and I watch them all, but I just think that there's something about the Masters. The start of spring, it feels like something passed down through generations. I don't know why. Maybe it's because it's the same course every year. Like, everybody, if you watch it enough, I'm not kidding. I don't even need a font. I'm not joking. If you just show a golfer, I could tell you what hole he's on. Like, you stand behind. We could do this. Like, if we wanted to make a short at the SDPN, all you have to do, I would go 100%. I guarantee it. I know what hole it is from behind the golfer on any shot.
Next time we do an in-person show, we need you on camera doing that, because what the hell? If I knew you could do that, I would have prepared. Now,
I've watched an insane amount of Masters over the years. I've been to the tournament 3 times. I covered it earlier in my career, so I've been around it a lot. So might not be the flex I'm trying to present it as, but I'm telling you,
it's still a flex. The fact that you've been is a flex.
Yeah, but I'm telling you, you could show me unless the guy is like, if all you see is just a whole bunch of trees in him, I might not know. But if he's on the fairway or at a green or on a tee box, I could tell you what hole it is just from seeing the picture.
That is impressive, and we need that put to the test. I'll get to a few questions for Ask CJ. Thank you to everyone who sent in questions, by the way. We'll start with this one from Cody Brown. An annual question from Cody Brown. Did you attend the Float Your Fanny Down the Ganny this year? Did you participate? Cody said he had to miss it, but he's wondering if you did. And he says, hope being a dad is going awesome. I know you're a good one. Sorry about less sleep.
I'm not going to complain about less sleep. Some days are a challenge, but honestly, my life is so much richer, fuller. Like, I'm bursting, man. Like, it's so cool. Our guy turned 2 months just a couple days ago. So 2 months flew by, and I know every parent says this, but like I can see that time is going to become quite elusive. I was not at Float Your Fanny Down the Ganny, which anyone right now, if you're still with us, you're like, what the heck is this? But there's an event in Port Hope, which is a town beside my hometown of Cobourg. There's a river that runs through it called the Ganaraska River. And at some point, I think in the 80s, there was a major flood. Like the river literally capsized and like the whole downtown was underwater. And since that point, they've done an event every year called Float Your Fanny Down the Ganny, where people either just go in dinghies or make interesting crafts and go down the Ganaraska River. It's just kind of, I guess, I don't know where the trend started after that flood, but I think it's related to that. I remember as a kid going and like you stand on the banks of the river and you just watch everyone and wave at them and, laugh at the people who have silly costumes on. It's just a fun event. But I was tied up this year. Maybe one day I'll take my son there though. That'd be pretty cool because it's a unique, like local legend type of thing. And I appreciate the question, Cody. And honestly, everything's going great here, even with a little bit less sleep.
Glad to hear. Ren Hero has this question. As incredibly unlikely as it is, and assuming they don't retire at the same time, should the league partially waive its 3-year waiting period to have Sidney Crosby and Alexander Ovechkin enter the Hall of Fame at the same time? Or would forcing that be a little much considering they've been compared side by side for their entire careers?
Wow, that's a good question. Because let's just say, for argument's sake, and we know that we don't know the truth, but let's say Ovechkin retires this year. So the clock for him, it's a 3-year clock. Now, we don't know if he plays in Russia, which, is a possibility that clock would still extend. But just for argument's sake, Ovechkin retires now in 2026, so he would be eligible to go in 2029. Let's say Crosby plays out the 2 years left on his deal. He retires in 2028. Would you waive the period for Crosby, not because you're saying he's better than Ovechkin, but putting them in side by side? I kind of would like the symbolism of it. Like I could talk myself into that. I don't think they should waive the waiting period though, just because of their greatness. And that's not a slight at them. I know it's been done 9 times in the past. And in fact, in 99, when Wayne Gretzky, they announced a couple days after he retired that they were waiving the waiting period. He was going right in, but they also said, this is the end of that practice. And the reason I like that is twofold. I think it's actually nice for a player to get that couple years from the end of his career before he comes back and like really celebrates it. Like, I think it actually creates a natural window where it's like you go through the transition from player to whatever you do afterwards. It's great to come back 3 years later and celebrate and reflect. Like, I think that's kind of a healthy waiting period. If you look at the other sports, Julian, and I did look this up at one point, but it's off. But I think baseball and basketball, one of them is a 4-year waiting period and the other's 5. So like this is something, or football. Anyway, this is something that's normal in halls of fame elsewhere. And the other part of it is it does create kind of a 2-tier hall if you have players that you waived it for, but then other guys go in. Like I like the idea of everyone being equal going into the hall, even though, of course, when you're talking about the careers of Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin, there's very few players across the whole history of the league that have ever been at their equals. But, I could be talked into waiving this rule if the situation allowed for them to go in together. I don't think they'd even mind that, honestly. I mean, neither of these guys, they've been celebrated so much. Mm-hmm. Like, imagine the visual of them, like maybe walking in the red carpet together or like doing a press conference together at that event. Like that, honestly, it would be super cool. I go to the Hall of Fame ceremonies every year. For me, it's one of the highlights of the hockey calendar, to be honest. And I could be talked into this Crosby Ovechkin dual Hall of Fame class. But the other side of it is I could also see Sidney Crosby playing like 5 more years. honestly.
Yeah.
So it might not even make sense. Like Ovechkin might be going into the Hall of Fame while Crosby's still playing or something like that too.
Last one for you from producer Drew. Of all the matchups that we know will happen in round one, what's your favorite round one matchup?
So take me through them again. We know we have Minnesota, Dallas. We have Pittsburgh, Philadelphia.
Yes. Tampa, Montreal is also locked in.
And is anything else locked in?
Hopefully I'm not blanking, but Colorado and
no, because LA could still jump up.
No, exactly. So that's also not locked up either. So we still have a handful of.
I think there's an outside chance it could still be Colorado, Edmonton in round one if the Kings jumped over Edmonton and Anaheim jumped over Edmonton. Like it's not the most likely. I'll tell you this: if we got Colorado, Edmonton in round one, that would probably be my favorite because it's like it's the chaos. That's another chaos one. I'm gonna go with.
We can get Edmonton, LA in the first round too.
No one wants to see that again.
I don't want to see that again.
No one
either,
wants to see that again.
I'm also bringing that up. But Colorado, Edmonton first round would be insane.
Yeah, just because it's a chaos. It's a chaos element. But I'm gonna of the ones we know for sure to answer the spirit of Nick's question. I'm gonna say Montreal, Tampa intrigues me the most. As I mentioned, I think the Lightning would probably be my favorite to come out of the East at this point. But there's also a lot of question marks about that team. Obviously, Montreal is an up-and-comer. And it's kind of bookends, Julian. I'm going back into my history books here. But when the Lightning first made the playoffs under John Cooper, I believe it was 2014, they played the Habs, and the Habs won that first series pretty handily. But then the next year, they faced each other again, and Tampa beat Montreal and went on to the Stanley Cup final. They've had this run. And and then obviously they end up facing each other in the COVID Cup, which is kind of a weird scenario. And then now it's like Montreal's on the rise. I'm not saying Tampa's on the fall, but it's kind of like they've been passing a baton back and forth. So I just, it's not predicting that the Habs would win, but I think that could be a pretty fun series, kind of a chaos series. And of the ones that, look at, if you live in Pennsylvania, you're going to love the Flyers Penguins, but I'm going to go Tampa, Montreal, final answer.
All right, lock it in. I love that answer. Love all your answers. Ask CJ, another success. This episode, another success. Great work as always, man.
Thank you.
Great job on a Monday. On a Tuesday, I should say. We're supposed to have done this on a Monday, but it's a Tuesday. It feels like a Monday.
Yeah, thanks for your patience, everyone. Julian was traveling. I was not available as much as I should be. Anyway, we got it done, bud.
Yeah, we got it done. And with the playoffs coming up, there will definitely be more travel, at least for one of us, for the next coming days. We'll see how it goes for the next little while. But subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done so already, and subscribe to the SDPN YouTube page as well. And we will have more episodes to come.
Yeah, I should say, I just thinking out loud, the next episode might not come out till Friday because Thursday is kind of a nutty day. So anyway, we'll figure that out in the chat and we'll get back to you, but it'll come before the end of the week.
Depending on the scheduling, Friday could be a nutty day too.
Maybe we record Thursday night. Anyway, nobody needs to see us do this. Do you want us to see us go through our calendars and see what works here?
Yeah, I can pull it up on my laptop here. Anyways, thanks for listening, guys. Talk to you guys later this week.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.
Hey, did you like the thing you just watched?
Was it hilarious? Was it informative? Was it me losing my mind?
Possibly. Potentially. Most of the time it is. Hey, listen, if you like what SDPN has to offer, you should check out more of our videos and subscribe to our channel by clicking subscribe, or Steve will find you.